There is a moment just before impact when the body knows what the mind has not yet registered. The muscles tense, the breath catches, the world slows into a terrible clarity. And in that split second before collision, something soft deploys between the hard surfaces, something designed to absorb the shock, to crumple inward so that others remain intact. You know this moment. Not in cars, but in kitchens. In living rooms where the air grows heavy. In the space between your father's rising voice and your mother's silence. You learned early that you could be that soft thing. The buffer, the shock absorber. When tension filled the house like smoke, you would rush toward it with a joke, a distraction, a performance of lightness so convincing that sometimes even you believed it. You watched your mother's face for storm clouds. You monitored your father's tone for the first rumble of thunder. And you moved through the rooms like a small diplomat, carrying peace offerings of laughter and compliance. Anything to prevent the crash you knew was coming. They called you mature for your age, responsible, easy. What they meant was, you have learned not to need. You have learned to sense danger in a furrowed brow, in a silence that lasts 3 seconds too long. You have become a student of emotional weather, reading the atmospheric pressure in every room you enter, adjusting your shape to whatever will keep the sky from falling. Now you are older. The house you grew up in exists only in memory, but the instinct remains lodged in your nervous system like a factory setting you cannot reprogram. A text message without punctuation sends your heart racing. Your boss frowns during a meeting, and you spend the afternoon replaying every word you said, every moment you might have disappointed. Your partner asks if you're okay, and you say yes automatically, even when the truth is splintering inside you. The words, "it doesn't matter," and "whatever you want," have become your native language. You have said them so many times that you have forgotten what your own preferences taste like. Conflict terrifies you more than loneliness, more than failure, more than the slow erasure of yourself that happens each time you swallow your truth to keep someone else comfortable. You were not born to carry the emotional weight of every room you enter. You did not arrive in this world with the job description of peacemaker. But somewhere in childhood, in a home where conflict meant danger and harmony meant survival, you learned that your existence was justified only by your usefulness. That love was not given freely but earned through the careful management of other people's feelings. That peace was not something that existed naturally, but something you had to manufacture with your own disappearance. This is not about maturity. This is about survival, and it is time to understand the cost. People praise you for being easy to get along with. They say you have a gift for bringing people together, for smoothing over rough edges, for keeping the peace. They do not see what happens in the hours after, when you are alone and the performance finally ends. They do not see you sitting in the dark, trying to remember who you actually are beneath all the versions of yourself you have offered to others. Let us be honest about what you have been doing. You have not been creating peace. You have been creating the appearance of peace. There is a difference, and your body knows it even when your mind pretends otherwise. Real peace emerges when conflict is acknowledged, metabolized, transformed into understanding. What you have been practicing is appeasement, the art of making problems invisible by absorbing them into yourself. You do not resolve tension. You postpone it. You throw your body over the fire to smother the flames, and you call the resulting stillness harmony. But the fire is still burning. You can feel it. You change shape depending on who is watching. With some people, you are animated, full of energy and enthusiasm. With others, you become quiet, careful, contained. This is not dishonesty. This is not manipulation. This is the survival skill of a child who learned that adaptation meant safety. You became a chameleon because in your world, visibility in the wrong form could be dangerous. Better to blend, better to mirror, better to become whatever would keep you safe from anger, from disappointment, from the terrifying possibility of abandonment. But chameleons do not change color for fun. They do it because predators are watching. The exhaustion you feel is real. It comes from a particular kind of labor that has no name in the conventional economy, the work of constantly calibrating your presence to match the needs of everyone around you. You walk into a room and immediately scan for emotional temperature. Who is upset? Who needs soothing? What version of yourself will cause the least disruption? You make these calculations so quickly, so automatically, that you do not even register them as choices. They feel like breathing, like something you were born to do. Except you were not born to do this. You were trained. The emptiness you sometimes feel, that hollow sensation in your chest when someone asks what you want, that is the cost of self-abandonment. You have spent so many years prioritizing other people's comfort that you have lost track of your own edges. You do not know where you end and others begin. You carry their disappointments in your body. Their anger becomes your anxiety. Their sadness seeps through your skin and you mistake it for your own. This is not empathy. This is not kindness. This is the blurring of boundaries until there are no boundaries left, until you have become a vessel for everyone's overflow, a reservoir for feelings that were never yours to hold. And the most painful part, you are good at it, so good that people depend on it, so good that when you finally try to stop, when you attempt to say no or express a need, you feel like you are betraying some fundamental contract, breaking a promise no one remembers you making, but everyone expects you to keep. The guilt is not accidental. It is the lock on the cage you have been living in. To understand how you became this, you must return to the beginning, not to blame, but to witness. Not to remain stuck, but to see clearly what was built inside you when you were too young to know that other architectures were possible. The home you grew up in was not structurally sound, not in the way that matters to a child's nervous system. Perhaps there was yelling voices that cracked like thunder doors, that slammed like punctuation marks on arguments that never quite resolved. Perhaps your father's anger was a sudden storm that appeared without warning, flooding the rooms with a tension so thick you could taste it metallic on your tongue. Perhaps your mother absorbed his rage in silence, her body going rigid, her face becoming a mask you learned to read for signs of how afraid you should be. Or perhaps the danger was quieter. Perhaps your parents waged a cold war, their resentment expressed through strategic silence, through sentences left unfinished, through the particular cruelty of people who have stopped fighting because they have stopped caring. You became the messenger between two armed camps carrying information neither would request, directly translating their coded language, trying to build bridges across a canyon that widened every day. In these environments, you learned a simple equation. When they fought, the world became unstable. When they were angry, you were not safe. Not physically, perhaps, but emotionally, and to a child, emotional abandonment is a kind of death. So, you developed a strategy. You would prevent the fighting. You would absorb the tension before it could escalate. You would become so helpful, so pleasant, so undemanding that your very presence would calm the waters. You became the comedian, the clown, the child who could always make them laugh, just when things were getting dangerous. Or, you became the helper, anticipating needs before they were spoken, cleaning without being asked, making yourself useful in ways that earned temporary approval. Or you became sick at precisely the right moments, your body offering a crisis that united your parents in concern, giving them something to focus on besides their mutual contempt. This was not manipulation. This was genius. This was a child's brilliant, desperate solution to an impossible problem. But here is what no one told you then, what you are only beginning to understand now. You were trying to fix something that was never yours to fix. The instability in your home was not caused by your failure to be good enough. It existed before you were born. It would have existed whether you performed perfectly or not. But children do not have that perspective. Children believe they are the center of the universe, which means when the universe is falling apart, it must be their fault. And if it is their fault, then maybe, just maybe, they can fix it. So you tried. Every single day you tried. What you were learning, though, you had no words for it then, was a particular trauma response. Not fight where you would have met aggression with aggression. Not flight where you would have hidden or run away. Not even freeze where you would have collapsed into shutdown. You learned something more subtle, more insidious, more difficult to recognize as trauma because it looks so much like goodness. You learned to fawn. The fawn response is the strategy of appeasement. When faced with threat, you move toward it. You make yourself useful to the source of danger. You study the predator's needs and fulfill them before they can become demands. You become so agreeable, so accommodating, so attuned to the other person's desires that they have no reason to hurt you. You befriend the danger. You charm it. You make it need you. This is the response of intelligent, sensitive children in environments where power is distributed unequally and unpredictably, where anger cannot be confronted or escaped, where survival depends on reading the emotional weather and adjusting yourself to match it. You learn to feel other people's feelings before they felt them. You learn to sense a shift in mood the way animals sense earthquakes through some deep instinctual vibration that told you, adjust now before it is too late. And it worked. Your hypervigilance kept you safe. Your compliance earned you the label of good child. Your ability to manage other people's emotions meant you avoided the worst of their dysfunction. But what worked in childhood becomes a prison in adulthood. Because now you cannot stop. The mechanism is automatic. You walk into a room and your nervous system immediately begins scanning for threat. A person's tone shifts slightly and your whole body responds, flooding with cortisol, preparing you to manage an emergency that may not even exist. Someone expresses disappointment and you feel it as a referendum on your right to exist. You have become a human thermostat, constantly adjusting your temperature to match the environment, never asking whether the environment should adjust to you. This is what psychologists call codependency, though that word does not capture the felt experience of it. It feels like this: you cannot relax when someone near you is upset. Their unhappiness becomes your emergency. If your mother is sad, you cannot allow yourself joy. It would be a betrayal, an obscenity proof that you do not care. If your partner is stressed, you absorb their stress, add it to your own, carry both loads as if this is what love requires. You have learned to locate your worth outside yourself, in the satisfaction of others, in your ability to keep everyone comfortable. Your boundaries are not just blurred, they are demolished. You do not know where you end and others begin. Their emotions pour into you like water into a vessel with no bottom, and you mistake this permeability for compassion. You tell yourself you are being caring, being present, being a good friend, a good partner, a good child. But beneath the narrative you have constructed, your body is screaming. It is exhausted from holding feelings that do not belong to it. It is sick from swallowing truths that need to be spoken. And beneath even that exhaustion is something else. Something you have been taught not to feel, not to express, not to acknowledge, even in the privacy of your own mind. Anger. You are angry. You have been angry for a very long time. But in your world, anger was the most dangerous emotion. Anger destroyed things. Anger made people leave. Anger was what happened right before everything fell apart. So you learned to swallow it. You learned to transmute it into something more acceptable: sadness, anxiety, fatigue. You learned to turn it inward, where it could harm only you. But anger does not disappear just because you refuse to feel it. It goes underground. It becomes the depression that makes you heavy and slow. It becomes the passive aggression that leaks out in forgotten commitments and late arrivals. It becomes the resentment that builds like sediment at the bottom of a river, layer upon layer of unspoken frustration, until you cannot remember what it feels like to flow freely. You say yes when you mean no. You smile when you want to scream. You agree when you want to argue. And each time you betray yourself this way, each time you prioritize someone else's comfort over your own truth, the anger grows. But you have nowhere to put it. So you hold it in your jaw, in your shoulders, in the tight place behind your ribs that never quite releases. The word no feels dangerous in your mouth. It feels like violence, like cruelty, like proof that you are not the good person you have spent your entire life trying to be. So you avoid it. You find ways around it. You say maybe, or I'll think about it, or whatever you want, and you tell yourself this is kindness, when really it is cowardice. Not the cowardice of a weak person, but the cowardice that comes from a nervous system that learned early that speaking your truth could cost you everything. And so you continue. You continue to be the buffer, the mediator, the one who makes it okay. You continue to read the room and adjust yourself accordingly. You continue to carry the emotional labor of keeping everyone around you regulated, even as you yourself are falling apart. This is what it means to be the peacemaker. Not someone who creates genuine peace, but someone who has learned to sacrifice themselves on the altar of false harmony. Someone who believes deep in their bones that their existence is justified only by their ability to make others comfortable. But you are tired now, so tired. And somewhere beneath the exhaustion, beneath the guilt, beneath the fear of what would happen if you finally stopped, there is a small voice asking, what if I did not have to do this anymore? What if peace was not something I had to create by erasing myself? What if I could exist fully and honestly and still be loved? Before we speak of healing, before we map the way forward, there is something that must be said. Something you need to hear beneath all the analysis of wounds and survival mechanisms. You are not broken. The skills you developed are real skills. The sensitivity that allows you to read a room in seconds to sense the subtle shift in someone's energy before they themselves have named it, to know what people need. Sometimes before they ask, this is not a weakness. This is a form of intelligence that cannot be taught in schools. It is perception refined to an art form. It is the ability to hold complexity, to see multiple perspectives simultaneously, to understand that most conflicts contain legitimacy on all sides. In the right contexts, you are extraordinary. You are the person teams turn to when collaboration has broken down. You are the friend people call when they need someone who can listen without judgment, who can hold space for contradiction, who can help them see their situation from angles they had not considered. You are the partner who remembers small details, who notices when something is off, who creates emotional safety through attentiveness. These are gifts, real gifts. The problem has never been the gifts themselves. The problem is the why beneath the how. The problem is that you use these abilities not from a place of choice, but from a place of compulsion. Not because you want to help, but because you believe you must. Not as an offering, but as a tax you pay for the right to exist in proximity to others. There is a difference between empathy and obligation, between attunement and self-erasure, between choosing to support someone and believing you are responsible for managing their emotional state. True empathy means feeling with someone. It means understanding their pain, acknowledging their struggle, offering presence. But it does not require you to fix them. It does not demand that you absorb their distress into your own body. It does not make their happiness a precondition for your own. You can witness someone suffering without becoming responsible for ending it. You can see that someone is upset without making it your emergency. You can care deeply about a person while still maintaining the boundary between their experience and yours. This is not coldness. This is not abandonment. This is the difference between compassion and codependency. When you see your friend crying, your first instinct is to stop the crying, to say something that will make it better to solve the problem, to return them to a state of okayness as quickly as possible. Because their tears make you unbearably uncomfortable. Because somewhere in your nervous system, someone else's pain still registers as a threat to your safety. Because you learned that other people's distress is information about your failure, evidence that you have not done enough, have not been enough. But what if their tears are not a problem to be solved? What if sadness is not an emergency? What if people are allowed to feel difficult things and your job is simply to be present, not to perform rescue? This distinction changes everything. It means you can be kind without being depleted. You can be supportive without being responsible. You can care about someone's well-being while understanding that their well-being is ultimately theirs to create, not yours to manufacture. The skills you have developed through survival can be reclaimed as tools you use by choice. Your ability to read emotional nuance becomes valuable when you use it to understand people, not just to manage them. Your capacity for mediation becomes powerful when you engage in it because you believe in the outcome, not because you are terrified of conflict. Your gift for creating harmony becomes genuine when you do it from a place of wholeness, not from a place of fear. But first, you must learn to distinguish between information and instruction. When you sense that someone is angry, that is information. It tells you something about their internal state. It does not automatically require you to do anything. Their anger is not a command. Their sadness is not a directive. Their disappointment is not a referendum on your worth. You can notice these things and still choose your response. You can feel empathy and still maintain your boundaries. You can understand someone's perspective and still disagree with it. You can love someone deeply and still say no. This is what it means to reclaim your gifts, to take the skills that were forged in survival and use them in service of thriving, to honor the child who learned to read the room so carefully, while releasing the adult from the belief that reading the room means you must always adjust yourself to match it. You were never meant to be a mirror. You were meant to be a presence, solid, whole, your own particular shape. The path forward is not complicated, but it is uncomfortable. And for someone who has spent a lifetime avoiding discomfort in others, learning to tolerate it in yourself will feel like learning to breathe underwater. It will feel unnatural, wrong, like you are doing something cruel, when really you are simply doing something new. The first practice is the hardest because it requires you to do nothing. When conflict arises, and it will arise, small conflicts, daily conflicts, the friction that comes from people being honestly themselves, your instinct will be to move toward it immediately, to smooth it over, to fix it, to make it disappear before anyone has to feel the full weight of it. Your hands will itch to intervene. Your throat will tighten with words of mediation. Do not move, not yet. Sit with the discomfort for 10 seconds. just 10. Feel what it is like to let tension exist in the room without absorbing it. Notice how your body responds, the tightness in your chest, the urge to speak, to laugh, to do something, anything to break the heaviness. Let the urge pass through you like a wave. Watch it rise and fall without acting on it. This is excruciating at first. 10 seconds feels like 10 minutes. But what you are learning is that discomfort is not danger, that conflict can exist without destroying everything, that people can be upset and the world does not end, that you do not have to be the one who makes it okay. When someone complains to you, practice waiting before you respond, before you offer advice, before you jump to solutions, before you try to make them feel better. Just listen. Let there be space. Let them sit with their own feelings. Most of the time, people do not need you to fix their problems. They need you to witness them. But you have been so busy managing outcomes that you forgot how powerful simple presence can be. This is how you begin to separate information from instruction. Their complaint is information about their experience. It is not an assignment for you to complete. The second practice is smaller than you think. It does not begin with grand declarations or dramatic confrontations. It begins with choosing what you want for dinner. The next time someone asks where you want to eat, do not say, "I don't mind," or "wherever you want," or "I'm easy." Choose. Say the name of a specific restaurant. It does not matter if they agree. It does not matter if you end up somewhere else. What matters is that you practiced having a preference and stating it out loud. You practiced taking up space with your want. Start here, with small, low-stakes choices. What movie you want to watch, what time you prefer to meet, whether you want ice in your water. These micro-boundaries are training wheels. They teach your nervous system that you can express a preference and survive the possibility of disagreement. They prove that your wants are not inherently selfish or burdensome. They are simply wants, and you are allowed to have them. As you practice, you will notice something strange. Some people will respect your boundaries easily. They will hear your preference and either agree or negotiate, treating your input as valuable. These are people who were always safe. You just never tested it because you never gave them the chance. But others will resist. They will seem confused, even offended by this new version of you that has opinions. They will say, "You have changed." They will call you selfish or difficult or too sensitive. They will miss the old you, the one who required nothing, who adapted to everything, who made their lives easier by making your own life smaller. This is information. Pay attention to who gets angry when you start having boundaries. Pay attention to who treats your needs as inconvenient. These are the relationships that were built on your self-erasure. And you will have to decide what to do with that information. The third practice will feel dangerous because you have spent your entire life believing that anger is destructive, that it ruins relationships, that it makes you a bad person. But anger is not what you think it is. Anger is not rage. It is not violence. It is not cruelty. Anger is simply a signal that a boundary has been crossed. It is your internal alarm system telling you that something is not right. And you have been disconnecting the alarm for so long that you no longer know when you are being violated. So you must learn to feel anger again. Start privately. In your journal, in your car, in the shower, where no one can hear you. Let yourself admit what you have been swallowing. The friend who only calls when they need something. The family member who criticizes you under the guise of concern. The partner who expects you to manage their emotions while dismissing yours. The colleague who takes credit for your work. The people who treat your time as less valuable than theirs. Write it down. Say it out loud. Punch a pillow if you need to. Let the anger move through your body instead of storing it in your muscles, in your jaw, in the permanent knot between your shoulder blades. This is not about attacking anyone. This is about releasing what you have been holding so tightly that it has calcified into chronic pain, into exhaustion, into depression. Anger is energy. It is life force. It is the part of you that knows you deserve better. Do not be afraid of it. Be curious about what it is trying to tell you. The fourth practice is linguistic. Pay attention to how often you apologize, for asking questions, for taking up space, for existing in ways that might inconvenience someone else for even a moment. You apologize reflexively, compulsively, as if your presence is inherently an imposition. Stop. Before you say "I'm sorry," pause and ask yourself, what am I actually apologizing for? Did I do something wrong, or am I simply existing? If you are late instead of "I'm sorry for being late," try "Thank you for waiting." If you need to ask for help instead of "I'm sorry to bother you," try "I appreciate your time." Shift from the posture of someone who is always in the wrong to someone who recognizes mutual respect and reciprocity. This is not about becoming rude or entitled. This is about releasing yourself from the constant performance of smallness. You are not a mistake that needs to be apologized for. You are a person. And people are allowed to need things to make requests to take up the space they actually occupy. These practices are not linear. You will do well for a day and then collapse back into old patterns for a week. You will set a boundary and immediately want to take it back. You will feel your anger and then feel guilty for feeling it. This is normal. This is how change happens. Not in one dramatic transformation, but in small, repeated choices that slowly reshape your nervous system's understanding of what is safe. Imagine an orchestra. For years you have been running between the musicians, adjusting their instruments, correcting their posture, ensuring every note is perfect before it is played. You have been so busy managing everyone else's performance that you forgot you are supposed to be conducting your own. Your life is not an emergency you must prevent. It is a symphony you are meant to lead. Real peace, the kind that does not require your constant intervention, the kind that does not demand your disappearance, is not the absence of conflict. It is the ability to remain yourself in the presence of discord. It is knowing that you can stand in the middle of tension without becoming the solution to it. That you can care about someone's pain without making it your responsibility to fix. That you can love people and still choose yourself. This will feel selfish at first. Every boundary you set, every time you prioritize your own needs, every moment you allow someone else to sit with their discomfort, instead of rushing to relieve it, your old programming will scream that you are being cruel, that you are failing, that you are not the good person you promised to be. But goodness is not the same as self-sacrifice. Kindness is not the same as self-abandonment. You can be loving and still have edges. You can be compassionate and still have limits. You can be the peacemaker without setting yourself on fire to keep others warm. The people who truly love you will not love you less when you stop performing. They will not leave when you start having needs. They will not punish you for being whole instead of convenient. And the ones who do, they were never loving you. They were loving what you did for them. There is a difference, and you deserve to know it. So release the responsibility that was never yours. Give back the emotional labor you were never meant to carry alone. Stop trying to control outcomes you cannot control. Stop managing feelings that belong to other people. And turn finally toward the child inside you who is still running through the house trying to prevent the crash. The one who believed that love was something you earned through perfect behavior. The one who thought that if you could just be good enough, sweet enough, quiet enough, everyone would stay. That child does not need to run anymore. You can hold them now. You can tell them what no one told them then. You were always enough, even on your worst day, even when you said no, even when you were inconvenient or angry or imperfect. You were always enough. The peace you have been seeking does not live in other people's approval. It lives in the moment you stop abandoning yourself. It lives in the breath you take when you finally choose to stay.